Greetings, everyone. Greetings. It is, yes, I know all of you know this because I say it every Tuesday. I can't help it. Favorite time of the week, Being Brown at Work live. And I have another absolutely phenomenal woman that is going to share some nuggets with you. I know you saw the title, The Dangers of Overusing Your Strengths, and you thought, how is that possible? Well, Alba Contreras Rodriguez is going to tell you how that's possible. So let me introduce you to Alba. Alba is owner and president of Fonds, Focus on Solution, LLC. Fonds provides executive coaching, team coaching, and consulting for leaders and organizations to excel and enable digital transformation focused on human readiness for technology adoption. Alba demonstrated success at coaching global executives on navigating corporate culture and processes, as well as cross generational leadership and multicultural organizations. Alba provides executive coaching and consulting for leaders and organizations to enable manufacturing's digital transformation focused on workforce and technology integration. Clients seeking to lead strategy and implementation of digital transformation, Industry 4.0 technologies can leverage her expertise to ensure human readiness for technology adoption. Alba spent her career, listen to this now, spent her career Ford Motor Company, General Motors Corporation, and KPMG Management Consulting, gaining international and global experience in operations, lean manufacturing, industrial engineering, vehicle launches, management consulting, information technology, and e commerce. Demonstrated ability to improve organizational effectiveness and bottom line performance. Alba is a global operations and management executive with a proven history of building high performing teams and leading sophisticated manufacturing and service organizations. She has a reputation as a visionary leader with a clear sense of purpose and urgency when faced with diverse challenges during periods of both declining sales and rapid growth. Alba brings expertise in establishing operational excellence within culturally diverse environments, translating conceptual models into specific growth strategies, and planning and executing manufacturing processes designed to increase quality, productivity, and reduce cost. She has extensive experience in operations management, global program management, process reengineering, change management, and cultural transformation. Alva previously served on the boards of directors for the Cancer Support Community and Madrinas, a Latino Leaders Network. She was the creator and champion of the Women's Network in Mexico, the co chair of Ford Women in Manufacturing, and executive collaborator for the Ford Hispanic Network. Most recently, she co founded the Ross Executive MBA Women's Initiative, University of Michigan, and co chair of Inform's Mosaic Affinity Group. And I have one more thing to add before we welcome Alba, because this just happened. Alba was named top 15 coaches in Detroit for 2021 by the Influence Digest, and she's number one. Number one. Welcome, Alba, to Being Brown at Work Live. It's such an honor to have you here. Welcome.
Thank you so much, Linda. This is a fabulous opportunity for you and I to have this conversation so timely. So, something that we don't really talk too much about. And as you said, people may have been intrigued by the title of this conversation as to what do you mean I'm overusing strengths. So
Exactly.
it is definitely one of the areas that I love coaching about, and it's extremely common. So I'm elated to be here tonight and sharing this conversation with everybody.
Oh, it's an honor for me. And as all of you listening now, watching this live, and even if you're going to catch this on the replay, phenomenal experience Alba has had. Her track record is unparalleled. I read the companies that she was with, and you see the depth and breadth of the experience. So Alba, let's jump right in here. I mean, overusing strengths. What does that mean? I mean, how is that even possible?
Absolutely. So overuse strengths is something that is very shocking because we don't think about it. And it's more easily seen than not, but that is
Mm.
precisely the difficulty with it is it's pretty much a blind spot. It's kind of
Ah.
when something is it's too much of a good thing when that happens, right? So
Mm,
when
okay.
you think about the strengths, being very social or being very results driven or being very problem solving oriented. So when you think about all of those, we don't necessarily associate it with a weakness. But what
Right.
happens is when we have a strength and we either overuse it or misuse it, it becomes a weakness or liability.
Mm. And so, Alba, in your experience, either you personally or with your clients over the years that you've worked on, how have you seen it? My one question, or I've got two actually. How have you seen it manifest itself? And would you say it's more prevalent in women than men, or pretty equal?
It's pretty equal. It's pretty
Mm,
equal. I
okay.
would say, though, that for people of color, what I have noticed and I have lived it, I have experienced it, is that sometimes those strengths that we exhibit are encouraged. So let me
Mm,
give, for
yes.
instance,
Yes.
perfectionism.
Ah, yes.
Perfectionism is one of those things that I have personally struggled my entire life, but it was encouraged,
Mm-hmm.
particularly in corporate America, because in order for me, as being the only woman in the room or being the only
Mm-hmm.
Latina,
Mm-hmm.
I definitely had to go 120% or go the extra
Yes.
miles.
Yes.
So it was always encouraged
Yes. And if
that,
I could add this
yeah,
too, Alba, didn't mean to interrupt you, but I can relate to what you just said because I had the perfectionism thing as well. And I will tell you, it started with me young because I was always told I had to be better than, right?
yes,
People of color, women of color. We have
yes,
that intersectionality where women, female,
yes,
and then Latino, African
yes.
American. So we had to work harder, be better. To your point, go right ahead.
Absolutely. So then, one of the things that I noticed is that when I decided to take early retirement 4 years ago and launch my own business, I started thinking, well, continuing to have these perfectionism tendencies is not really going to help me
Mm,
in launching a business. So I
mhm.
needed to start changing my thinking as to you better seek progress and not perfection. But it is one of those strengths, right? That
Yes.
we can call it a stickler. It's when you become a stickler with everything. And
Yes.
again, it's something that an overuse strength, the way to identify it is what kind of emotion it's making you feel. Is it a
Oh.
negative emotion or is it a positive emotion?
Oh, okay.
So that is one of the ways to kind of gauge. So
Okay.
how am I feeling right now? May I be overusing this? But
Yes.
it's hard to get to even that question because this is not something, see, the way that in leadership development, the way that typically all the tools that exist, is very binary. It's either a
Mhm.
strengths or
Or a
weaknesses.
weakness. Right.
And typically, the leadership development wants to focus on the weaknesses,
Yes.
right? What
Yes.
happens is that doesn't allow us to really pay attention to an overused or misused strength,
Mm.
right?
Oh, good point. Yes.
So the question is, so how do we know
How do
if
you
I'm
know? Yes.
overusing a strength? Well, there are multiple ways that we can find out. And the number one thing is to become more self-aware,
Okay.
right? So
Yes.
how do we become more self-aware? Well, it's really reflecting.
Mhm.
It's also seeking feedback from others.
Yes.
and asking others, how do we make them feel?
Yes. How do they
What,
experience you,
how
right?
do they
Yes.
experience you?
Yes.
And
Yes.
as Maya Angelou says, people don't remember what you do or say, but how you make them
Make
feel.
them feel. That's so
And
true.
the question is, if we ask others, how do we make them feel? We may get some of that feedback. So that's one way of finding out. The
Yeah.
other way of finding out is when we are so used, a lot of people go through a 360 assessment,
Mm-hmm.
and
Mm-hmm.
people provide them with feedback about their behaviors. And when we get those reports and there are these very, very high numbers on the strengths or on the behaviors, those may provide some clues.
Ah, okay.
Because what happens is that the moment when we overuse a strength is typically the moment when we get hijacked or when we are
Ah,
under extreme stress.
that amygdala. That
Yes,
amygdala hijacking.
that's right.
Yes.
That's right. So
Yes. The
when
high
that
stress.
happens is when something that it's phenomenal, it can be too much of a good thing.
Mm,
So a
mm.
leader can be very results driven, and they may drive their team crazy
Crazy.
because they get hijacked, they get highly stressed, they have extremely high expectations of the team, and yes, the team will deliver the results, but at a very high cost.
Ah. Wow. This is so powerful because to your point in corporate America, I mean, that's what we're measured on, right? We're measured on these results. And I was just Simon Sinek is somebody I follow a lot. I really like him.
Mhm.
I was actually watching a video earlier and he was talking about no such thing as soft skills. They're actually human skills. To your point, he even said you can be a high performer and have low human skills and you are not going to be the most effective leader. That's what you just said. I mean, you can be results driven, you can hit those targets,
Mhm.
but you can do it at a cost to your team because you're driving them crazy, you're stressed out,
Yeah.
you're not connecting with them in any human way because, again, you're not even self aware and you let your amygdala get hijacked and then they're stressed. And like, I think you also, this is also something I know you've heard of, Alba. People don't leave jobs, they leave bosses, right?
Mhm.
They leave bosses. And one way to leave them is over a boss that's overusing their strengths.
That's right.
This is so powerful because, like, to you, what you said earlier when we first started talking, it's not this is not discussed a lot.
No, no,
And
it's
why do
not.
you think that is? I mean, you've been just an Influence Digest. I'm going to say it again. Top 15 coach in Detroit just came out, and so in you're on the leading edge of team coaching, and the dynamics around that. Is this overuse of strengths a new phenomenon? Would you say, or just something we haven't paid attention to?
I think it's something we haven't paid attention to
Okay.
because in particularly during these times of what we call these VUCA environment, right? Volatile, uncertain,
Yes.
complex,
Yes.
and ambiguous,
Yes.
which by the way, with the pandemic, I added another U to that, which is unprecedented.
Ah,
Right.
yes,
So
yes,
when
yes.
we are living in this business environment and in the challenges that society is going through right now, the environmental climate challenges, all these things, they look like the perfect storm, right? So what
Mhm.
happens is that we have been focusing on how do we look for the weak point in what are the weaknesses that we need to either develop those skills, etc., without really paying attention that too much of a good thing
Yeah,
is not
yeah.
necessarily the answer. So actually, a strength, it's how do you maintain a balance of not
Balance.
overdoing it versus
Mm,
or underdoing it. So how do
yes.
you maintain that balance in that duality of, let me give you an example. Very common to have leaders who have been recognized, promoted, their brand identify them identify them as these wonderful problem solvers,
Uh-huh.
right? Those people who roll up their sleeves and, they are the ones who save the day. They are the go-to person in the organization. And what happens is that as they go up the ladder, the famous phrase from Marshall Goldsmith, what got you here won't get
We'll
you
get
there.
you there.
It
Yes.
becomes this liability that no longer, when you go to the boardroom, the board is not going to be hearing you 300 PowerPoint slide presentation,
So true.
right? You need to be
Yes.
strategic. You need to be concise. You need to be
Mm-hmm.
strategic. You need to think about the ecosystem. You are
Yes.
not in front of the board knowing all the details
Deep.
of the trenches, right? So that's an
Oh,
example of those transitions are so critical for people to really understand, because what happens, Linda, is that these become muscle memory. All these
oh
strengths have
yes.
become muscle memory for us, right? And we
Yes.
have been, again, I want to insist, rewarded and
Rewarded.
recognized for
Yes.
those, right?
Yes.
So
Yep.
we have
It's
been
true.
told this is a good thing, keep doing it. Well, it all depends on the circumstances.
Mm-hmm.
If you
Mm-hmm.
are expected to tone it down a little bit,
Yes.
right?
Right. If the balance is so key. Cheryl Thompson just said hello to you and I, so I just
Oh,
wanted to share that with
wonderful.
you. Yes. So that the balance is so key.
Yeah.
And I, Alba, this is so wonderful information. I knew when you and I talked about what you would share with my audience, I knew this was going to be beautiful, some nuggets. So let's talk about, you know, what can one do? What can one do? And I would love, before you get into that, could you share maybe some of your personal experience? I know you talked about perfectionism, but is there anything else in your career, in your personal experience, that you were challenged with in overusing strengths, and maybe how you overcame it?
Well, I think that, as I mentioned, the perfectionism one, the other one was that element of being recognized for being the person who was given the assignments that nobody else would want,
Oh,
right?
wow.
And be okay, either solve a very difficult problem or create something from a clean slate. So that was
Mm,
kind of my brand. And that's why I had the opportunity to have a very cross-functional experience
experience.
at Ford
Yeah.
for 23 years. So the reality of it is that when you are so operational, and I have the ability to play in both fields, to be in the field and be on the sideline. But that is something that needs to be always, again, we need to be very self aware of it.
Hmm.
But I
Hmm.
would say that the fact that sometimes we feel like, let's say, well, if I say no to something, will that get me in trouble?
Hmm. Hmm. Hmm.
And or if I don't give it my 120%, will that have an impact on me? So I would say that that is definitely something that I felt challenged with,
Hmm.
and definitely is something that I see in my clients today, is the
Yes.
fact that we have a lot of leaders don't realize that some of the behaviors that they exhibit may not necessarily be because of their own decision, but they're exhibiting behaviors of the system that they represent.
Oh.
Okay. And
Oh,
so so
wow.
so basically
I
is
like that.
you are surrounded by a certain set of behaviors and expectations. And then as you try to emulate that, you may end up overusing some of your
Using strengths.
strengths,
Oh
right?
my gosh, that is so powerful, because there's a lot of danger of assimilation and emulation.
Yes.
E- Emulating somebody else and trying to copy what appears from a distance to be a successful way of
Yes.
doing something and approaching something could be extremely dangerous.
Mhm,
Oh my gosh,
mhm,
that was so good, Alba,
mhm,
what you just shared, because I can, as you were talking, I was thinking of leaders who were actually functioning and operating the way their environment drove them to do so, and not necessarily within character of themselves or
Right.
the brand they wanted to be. One of the things I often say, Alba, is, especially for women of color like yourself and myself, is that we can tend to get in our own way, right?
Mhm.
And I think one of the ways we do that is exactly what we're talking about tonight. Not recognizing that we could be going above and beyond, doing more than what's necessary, and because we believe this strength is so powerful. So, what I would love if you could right now, Alba, and I'm going to actually too. I think we've got your website we want to share and some other information, but could you step us through maybe 3 to 5, actionable things that women can do as they're listening to us talking now, and they're probably having some epiphanies in their mind. Oh my gosh, I'm that problem solver, or I'm that presentation guru, or I'm the time management, whatever it is that they have thought was their road, their what a skill they could leverage to success could be overused. So,
Absolutely.
what would you recommend to them?
So before I talk about the recommendations, you trigger a thought on me, which is that um, that emphasis on I have to focus on my job,
Mm,
but not on the career,
mm,
and how we look at what are the things that I need to do this with excellence, right? Which, by the way, can be perfectionism tendencies.
yes.
And then there is no space for good enough. It needs to
Ah,
be perfect. And what happens is that while we are doing that, all these things are happening around us. And then we start seeing people getting promoted and we see
yep.
opportunities coming along. But what happened? Well, we didn't spend enough time building relationships. We didn't spend enough time prioritizing the work. We didn't
Hmm.
give pay enough attention to delegating the work and to
Hmm.
really hold people accountable to it, so we wouldn't have to be working all the hours that we were working.
Yeah.
So there are so many elements that if we really do a forensic to it, there is
Yes.
some signals of overuse strengths.
Yes.
And what happens is that is inhibiting us from progress,
Yes,
right?
absolutely.
Yeah,
And I love your forensic analysis. I mean, I think that's so critical to do. Really take a deep look and
yeah,
be willing to reflect in the mirror as well. You
yeah,
know, oh, that's great. That's beautiful, because a lot of times we don't do that, and you're right. We are so focused on getting, working hard, hitting
yeah,
those targets, the perfectionism that you talked about,
yeah.
that we forget about, as I like to say, we forget about the being piece. We forget about that.
Hmm. Hmm.
Oh, this is
Yeah.
just this is wonderful. So did you
So,
want to move into some
yeah.
to some
So
actionable steps?
let's talk about some of the potential things that we can do to overcome that. Well, we
Yes.
already talked about how to identify it. So, what are
Yes.
potential overuse strengths?
Hmm.
We talked about asking
Yes.
others, looking at old feedback, asking people how they
Hmm.
feel, and doing some self reflection, right?
Right.
And
Right.
deep diving internally. Um, so, how to overcome it? There are two major areas that I would like to share. One is increasing our self awareness,
Hmm.
right? And is really taking the time, right, and having this space to really do that reflection. And there are 4 questions that are some of my favorite questions. There are many
Mm.
questions that I like, but these are very powerful questions. So as we are going through that reflection, and what I ask my clients to do is to journal.
Hmm.
I prefer if they write it, but they can also keep it on their computer.
Sure.
And the questions are, what should I start doing?
Hmm.
What should I stop doing?
Hmm.
What should I continue doing? or what should I do differently?
Mm.
Now,
Mhm.
those same four questions, we can use it for ourselves, but we
Yep.
can also ask others to
Others.
give us feedback,
Yes.
right?
Yes.
So in
I
that
love that.
conversation of identifying somebody who can be your accountability partner,
Mhm.
your significant other, your somebody from your team, etc., is to find those people who would give us candid feedback
Yes.
and
Yes.
help us answer those questions from their perspective. And
Yes.
then we
Yes.
can take a look at, okay, how am I looking at myself versus how others are perceiving me?
Mhm. Mhm.
So that's one piece of self awareness. And that's something that there is a resource that you're going to share my website that they can
Yep.
find a resource that can help with this. The second piece is what I call self command. So it's
Mm.
how do we build a new muscle? In other words, if
Ah.
muscle memory is what these um, behaviors, these overuse strengths, are coming and hijacking us, and they're showing up particularly under situations of high stress,
Yeah.
then the question is, how do we take over that? How do we intercept it?
Mhm.
And the way that we can do that is that, first of all, notice it. But for us to notice, we have to be need to have high
Aware.
self-awareness,
Yep.
right?
Yep. Yep.
To
Yep.
even notice it, because as we said at the beginning, a lot of these are blind spots. So
Yes.
we don't
Exactly.
see it. We don't see
Right.
it. So identifying it, then pausing, right? Maybe do some deep breathing,
Mhm.
pausing, and then also to shift the thinking. So let's say that the voice that we hear is that we really need to work 24 hours. This team needs to work 24 hours nonstop until we get this deliverable, this report, or this presentation, et cetera, et cetera.
Mhm.
Is to hear that voice and then pause. The
Yes.
power of pause is ginormous.
Yes.
Just
Yes.
the power of
Pause.
pausing, okay?
Mhm.
And then deep breathing, and then asking ourselves, how do I shift that? Because
Yes.
particularly those who lead others need to think about what I call the shadow of the leader. So if that leader is driving nonstop to get to that outcome, and they are sending emails at midnight, and they are nonstop, and they're chatting over a Slack or whatever
Yeah.
platform they're using, and texting and all of that, that's really dragging the
Yeah.
team
Yeah.
towards that. So that
Yeah.
again becomes another reason why we become into this space of, we end up cloning the behaviors that
Yeah.
we
Exactly.
despise, pretty much.
Exactly. Yeah. Exactly. That's the
uh,
emulation. Yes.
exactly.
Yes.
So the other
Absolutely.
piece is to repeat that process
Okay.
when we feel that voice, that impetus, just to pause, deep breathing, shift our
Yes.
thinking, repeat, 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 until we can build different muscle
That
memory.
new muscle. Oh, I love
Yes,
it. I love it. I
yes.
love it. Now, we're getting ready to wrap up here. One thing I did not want to make sure we run out of time because I want to share this. I'm going to put in the chat right now. I just posted it. So all of you that are watching this live, even if you're catching it on the replay, this is Alba's website. What you want to do is go there, fill out the contact information, which is your email address and your first and last name. That's it, because she has a wonderful freebie for you. And share a little bit, Alba, what that freebie is.
Well, it's pretty much ways to increase self-awareness. So
Yes, beautiful.
it's a deeper content to
Deeper
what
dive.
we just talked about very briefly.
Wonderful.
Yes,
And you've got 8 ways, right? Eight
that's
ways
right.
to, yes. So
Yeah.
please make sure you go to her website, go to the contact page, give her your email address and your first and last name. She is going to then immediately send you those 8 ways. And then, last but not least, you want to follow Alba because there's going to be a webinar, right, Alba? You're working on a webinar. Share a little bit about what's
That's
coming.
right. That's right. So I would love for you to either follow us, follow or connect via LinkedIn so that
Yes.
you can stay tuned to the webinar that's going to have is will be talking about a brand new group coaching program that I will be launching.
Ah, that is
So
fabulous.
it's going to be potentially a 3 month endeavor, and we're going to be really working on a lot of these
This
topic of
kind of stuff,
overuse
right?
strengths, and
Yes.
it's going to have it's group coaching, which is people. What's the difference between group coaching and team coaching? Group coaching is people who have the similar interests or things
Mm-hmm.
that they want to focus on, but they don't necessarily work in the
They
same
know each other.
organization or come from the
Exactly.
same walk of life, right?
Right,
Team
right.
coaching is different. Team coaching is teams that are within an organization who work for a
Mm-hmm.
specific team leader. So that's
Yeah,
the difference. But then the
yeah.
group coaching program is also going to have an individual component to it. So it's going
Oh,
to be
great.
very rich in terms of the
Nice.
support for that, for the person that joins.
Oh, that's awesome.
Yes.
Overusing strengths. I tell you, Alba, you're right. When we first opened this, it's not something that's talked about often, but it needs to be because I know I
Yes.
used to be a victim of it. Now that I understand what it is, and you shared your past experiences, and I really, really appreciate you too giving us more context and actually opening up our eyes to how we can overcome it once we properly identify it. Alba, it's been a pleasure having you on Being Brown at Work live. It's been a pleasure.
It's been wonderful to have this conversation in something that I am very
Mhm.
passionate about. And, my purpose is really to work with leaders and teams, help them recognize and achieve their highest potential so that they can better serve and add value to their
Yeah.
stakeholders. And I understand what's being in their shoes. So I
Yes.
really love being able to help them.
Oh, this is fabulous. And you helped already with my audience tonight. So thank you so much, Alba. Take
My
care.
pleasure. Wonderful. Thank you. Good night.
Good night.